Here we go. Welcome to the Women Inspired Podcast. I'm your host, April Seifert. There is nothing more powerful than a woman who is inspired to action, and that's my number one goal, to inspire you, my listeners, to take action in your lives. Each week, I get to interview some of the most inspiring women, and I'm bringing those interviews to you. Let's do it. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me for another awesome, inspiring interview from an amazing woman. You know, Archimedes once said, "Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I shall move the world." Now, that's powerful and inspiring and all, but he was moving the world with a lever and a fulcrum. Today, you're going to meet an incredible woman who is moving amazing amounts of weight only using her body. Today, you're going to meet a woman named Donna Adams, who is a record-setting powerlifter. She's going to share her story of how she got into the sport and how it is changing the way that she thinks about herself and her abilities and her body, and she's going to share amazing lessons with you along the way. I am so excited for you to meet Donna the Destroyer. Donna the Destroyer, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, April. I'm glad to be here.
So I gave everyone a bit of an intro about you with, all the official details and stuff, but in your own words, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a self-taught QA software tester. I did my bachelor's degree in history, so of course it translated well to computers.
Yeah, completely. Perfect.
And within the last 15 years, so for listeners at home, I'm going to be 45 this year. So about the time I turned 30, I decided I would start doing some athletic endeavors. And within the past 5 years, I got into lifting heavy things. And really within the last year and a half, I found myself a competitive powerlifter.
Just like walked right into that. La, la, la. I just happened to find myself. I love it.
Pretty much.
That's so awesome. So you have an epic nickname. I mean, Donna the Destroyer is a pretty epic nickname. How did you end up with that? What's that all about?
Well, I belong to probably the best gym in the world, the Movement Minneapolis, and the coaches there are phenomenal. I was working with Jen Sinkler and Jennifer Blake, and we were at a powerlifting meet, and I was in my zone, and my zone is I'm just going to focus on what needs to be done, no nonsense, and I'm going to just lift that weight. And Jen Sinkler turned to me and said, in between some of our lifts, "Has anyone ever called you Donna the Destroyer?" Because I really think that fits. So
that's awesome.
I decided to embrace it.
I love it. So you have this online presence around this Donna the Destroyer persona. Tell me a little bit about, I think you have a blog. Tell me a little bit about that.
I do, DonnaTheDestroyer.com. I began that blog, just about a year ago when I started to train for the 2016 USAPL Raw National Tournament, because I wanted to take people on the journey with me, because up until that moment, I had never thought of myself as an athlete. My perception growing up in, lower middle class household, group of very smart women was that you were either smart or you were a jock. You really couldn't be both. So I gravitated towards smart. And like I said, it wasn't until my 30s where I realized that I kind of liked this physical activity. And I wanted to show people, women in particular, that you could make that transition from everyday life into an athlete. Everybody is an athlete. And we just have to share our journey. And that was where I went from there.
That's awesome. You know, I have a bit of a background in powerlifting as well, and not quite as established as you are, but I think it's a really cool thing that you're bringing other women along for the journey and letting them see this really interesting side of you in this really interesting sport, because it's not something that has been traditionally for women, although it's pretty cool how booming and impressive the powerlifting scene has become in Minnesota, especially for women. It's really taken off.
It has. In the past year even, we've become about 44% of the registered powerlifters in Minnesota.
That's amazing.
When I started, the first meet that I went to, there were, maybe 20 female powerlifters. And now whenever there's a new powerlifting meet, the women are outnumbering the men in signing up and competing. So it's been really, really interesting. In 2017, there are going to be 2 state tournaments for powerlifting, one for men and one for women, because we realized that we needed to have enough space for both genders to compete.
That's incredible. So there's enough people that you can actually have a completely separate event for women. Either that or everybody's going to be there all day while they're watching everybody lift, and that gets to be a long day. So you've had this blog and you've been talking about your journey thus far, and through that most recent competition. But what are you doing with it now?
With the blog, I've decided to go in a slightly different direction. I'm still focusing on my pursuit of powerlifting and getting better and showing people what I can do both with my successes and my failures. I'm all about showing my failures. But I'm also expanding to a more personal part of myself, which happens to be my political side and just the fact that I want to help everyone succeed. So basically, instead of being quiet about things like my feelings toward this most recent election, I'm going to be putting more of that out there as well, just growing and showing people that we need to be active in all areas of our lives in order to make life better for everyone.
That's really cool. I mean, it's such a difficult thing. I can completely say, as I've been putting this podcast together, the fear that is deep down inside me while I'm thinking about the idea of pushing my voice out there in a very public way and putting these episodes out there for, maybe nobody to hear if nobody decides to listen, or maybe lots of people if it takes off. It's really terrifying to think about using your voice. And sometimes those terrifying things are the exact right thing to do, because we do each have a voice that we can use to get information out there and to spread the word. So I think that's really cool.
Thanks. And that's exactly the point of where I want to go, is to not be afraid to show my voice to everyone. I also will be curating the comments and showing people that the dialogue that I want to put out there is a respectful one. So if you disagree with me, great, but disagree with me politely and respectfully. Otherwise, if you're calling me names or calling someone else names, I'm not going to stand for it. You're going to get off of my board really quick.
I love it. Keeping that dialogue on a good level. That's the only way that you can have a decent discussion, is if people can disagree in an open-minded way and be open to listening to each other. I think that's awesome.
Thank you. I like I said, I do. I want all of the voices, because I realize that I do surround myself with like-minded people, because that's much easier to deal with. But there are obviously a lot of people out there who disagree with me. So this is my chance to explain my views and to hear from them.
I want to back up just a little bit. So we dove right into the sport of powerlifting, and you talked a little bit about
yeah.
getting into it in your 30s. But what was it that got you into powerlifting? It is not something that people just sort of randomly walk through their day-to-day life and decide, I think I'll go lift something that is heavier than my own body weight today. La, la, la. So how did you decide on powerlifting, or what got you into it?
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that was strange. It's normal for me. So how that came about was, for years I had been doing rock climbing and kayaking and bicycling and things like that with my husband and friends, and really needed something to help build my strength. I had some endurance, I had some strength, but rock climbing takes a lot of upper body and a lot of ability to pull yourself up, and I felt that I was lacking in it. So at one point, I actually discovered CrossFit. My brother-in-law, of all people, said, "Hey, I've got this boot camp class. Do you want to come with me some early morning at 6 a.m.?" And I said, "Do you know how early 6 a.m. is?"
I was going to say, and you went. Wow.
Right? I went once, and then I talked to the coach because I enjoyed it. I'm like, "Okay, do you have classes that aren't at 6 in the morning? Because I can't do this." And she's like, "Well, I've got this new thing." She was just starting and getting into the CrossFit. And I'm like, "Okay, I'll try it. I'll try almost anything once." And that's actually true and scary all at the same time. So I went and did some CrossFit, and I did that for 2 or 3 years. But what had always kept me coming back was the lifting heavy. I ended up with, through many years, many things, I ended up with a torn meniscus in my right knee. So I gave up CrossFit. It's a lot of stress. I'm a naturally competitive person, even though I don't seem like I would be. Very competitive. So I realized it was a bad combination for me to go into an exercise class where you wanted to get done as quick as possible, not necessarily following all the techniques. But in the back of my mind, I always knew I enjoyed lifting heavy. And I had met a woman who had done some powerlifting, and I'm like, that sounds interesting. So I was sitting on my couch trying to figure out what to do next, reading all of my blogs, and in one of them was a mention about a gym, Movement Minneapolis, where they cared about technique, cared about movement, and cared about how people performed rather than how quickly and how much. And my head said, "Ooh, I want that." So I went there, and it was about a year. I'd been going, once a week, checking things out, slowly building my tolerance because I'm competitive and I'm shy. Things, doesn't seem, once you get to know me, neither of those things seem like they should be true. But one day, one of the coaches said, "Hey, anybody interested in training for a powerlifting meet?" And I'm like, "Well, of course I am. Why wouldn't I?" And pretty much from there, the rest is history. I did my first powerlifting meet in May of 2015. I have to figure out my years. And that first year, in 2015, I actually did 4 powerlifting meets.
That's a ton.
Literally a ton.
That is so much. That's a really busy year.
It was, but after in February, had gone to watch my my gym mates compete in their first powerlifting meet, and I was hooked. I'm like, all I want to do is be up there lifting, and see how much I can do and how strong I am. Once I was able to compete in my first meet, it was just a no-brainer that this is what I was. I'm a competitive powerlifter now, and heaven help the rest of the world, but I'm going to keep doing it as much as I can.
That's fantastic. So for the people who aren't super familiar with how powerlifting meets work, can you just give us a little bit of an overview of how the meet runs and that type of thing?
Sure. So a powerlifting meet is made up of 3 lifts: the barbell back squat, bench press, and deadlift. In a meet, you get to do each one of the lifts 3 times, and the highest weight that you lift for each one of the lifts goes into your total, and that total is compared to people within your weight class. It's also technical and fun. And we figure out who's body weight percentage-wise lifts the heaviest. So for instance, each one of these lifts has both their technical characteristics as well as just lifting the weight itself. So for instance, we've got the barbell back squat, which is where you have the barbell on your back and literally you squat down. The trick in the barbell back squat is that for the particular federation that I belong to, which is USAPL, you need to have your hips go below parallel. So they have to be lower than your knees at the bottom of the squat. Sounds pretty easy, but that depth when you've got 300 pounds on your back gets to be pretty hard to hit.
I just want to say at some point today, whoever is listening to this podcast, go into your bathroom or someplace where people aren't going to think you're crazy and actually squat and hit that depth. It's really, really low. So imagining doing that with 300 pounds on your shoulders, just as you said, that's so difficult.
One of the things I love most about powerlifting is while it's a competitive sport and you are trying to, lift more than other people in your weight range, it's also a very personal sport because in reality, the only goal that I'm ever trying to beat is my best. I'm really not going out there saying, I'm going to beat Bonnie in the back squat. Mm-hmm. What I'm going out there saying is, I'm going to beat the back squat that I did 2 months ago, 3 months ago at my last meet. That's really what I'm going for. And that's what drives my satisfaction, is that while it's a competitive sport, my main competition is myself. I'm trying to improve myself rather than beat someone else. There's no one else there I can say it's your fault I didn't do X, Y, or Z, because I'm the one who was doing the lifting.
It's a really unique situation when you've got a activity like powerlifting where you're exactly right. You are really focused on self-improvement and improving yourself and your technique and getting stronger for you. And it's a way, I think that mindset is one that can be applied in a lot of different ways, both in our careers, in our personal relationships, as we just move through life. I think that mindset right there, how can I improve myself, not necessarily compete with someone else, is such a healthy way and such a neat way to approach situations and problems.
My mindset has shifted since I started powerlifting.
Tell me about that. I'm really curious about that.
Well, for a lot of my life, I've been a go-alonger. Okay, this is going this way, I'm just going to go along. Because everything that I was doing depended on someone else. What powerlifting has shown me and helped me realize is that I can depend on myself to do these things. I don't have to go to another person and say, can you do this for me? Or can we do this together? Because powerlifting is an individual sport. and it is about independence, except when we need a spotter, blah, blah, blah. But that's actually what I like, is it's independent, but if you don't have a team, it's really hard to get it done.
Totally.
So I can, in my life, take that and say, you know what, I can do all of this, but I can also depend on my team to help me get it done. And I can speak up and be strong about that emotionally, physically, mentally, however I need to at that moment. So it's just been a really weird way that powerlifting has come into the rest of my life.
I want to do something a little bit weird that people don't do very often, and I think especially we as women don't do very often. I want you to brag a little bit, because your performance at these competitions has been incredible, and I actually do follow your blog, so I was a little bit kind of playing the part earlier, but I want you to talk a little bit about how some of your recent competitions have gone, because it is just outstanding. And what you have that other people don't have is you have cold hard numbers. Like, you hit these particular numbers, and I think that's awesome. So I think you should brag.
Oh, sure. So up until my last powerlifting meet, which was the USAPL Raw Nationals in October of this year, I had been competing in the super heavyweight weight class, which means I was competing at greater than 84 kilograms. My lifts, they're not too bad. Okay, they're great.
They're outstanding. I mean, come on now.
Exactly. I have nothing to complain about. My back squat in the super heavyweight was 308 pounds. My deadlift, the last one that counted in a meet, was 330 pounds, and my bench press was 160 pounds.
That's so awesome.
But
that is so incredible.
Better.
It gets better. I love it. Keep going.
Yes. So for my, now we have to go back and say, remember, Donna's competitive. Even though she likes to say she does it for herself, she's still competitive. So what I did was looked at all of the entries and the qualifying totals for the people who were going to be within my weight class at the USAPL Raw Nationals. To back it up, I'm in the Masters 1 division, which means I'm in the 40 to 49-year-old women's division. And I looked at both the heavyweight, which is 72 to 84 kilos, and then the super heavyweight, which is 84 plus. And I was looking at the people who were in them and like, well, I'd be a lot more competitive in the 84 kilo class. So between June of 2016 and October of 2016, I cut my weight from 91 kilo to 82.3 kilos.
Holy cow.
Right.
I say that because, it's a challenging thing to do in order to have your, when you're lifting at that capacity,
mm-hmm.
a lot of your body weight is muscle. You carry mm-hmm. around a lot of muscle and lean tissue. And so in order to do something like that without having it impact your performance, you have to be so careful and do it so technically well. Right. So that's incredible that you were able to. That's really cool.
Thank you. So I was very happy, but at the same time, what I was going into the meets nationals thinking was, how is this going to affect my performance?
Mm-hmm.
So that was really tricky for me, and it did play mind games. But I ended up at nationals in my back squat, hitting a 275 back squat, and then I did actually complete a 297 back squat. but I was called on the technicality, so it didn't get to count. So I got to count to 275, but I did a 297. So I'm counting it as a gym PR.
Yes.
And then on my bench press, I finally hit my 165. I finally, after 6 powerlifting meets, finally hit 165. I had been stuck at 160 forever. So I hit 165, and then for my deadlift, I hit 336 pounds.
Wow.
If I look at the totals and I look at the raw numbers, they went down a little from my my qualifying meet. But then when I factor in, as they do with figuring out totals, when I factored in my weights, I'd actually increase my total based on body weight and weight lifted. So pound for pound, at Raw Nationals, I was able to increase what I had lifted. So I felt pretty damn good after I could sit and think about it. So
I think you definitely should. I think you should be totally proud of that. That's an amazing accomplishment. And that is just an incredible amount of weight to be moving with, your own one single human body. I think that's so cool.
Yep. And I'm really excited because, like I said, I've been doing this for a year and a half, and I was able to be up there with people who have been doing it for 10, 15 years. And while I was a little in awe, it was also, look, I'm on the same stage. I feel pretty good about that.
What I think is cool about what you just said is you recognize the fact that you put in the hard work to get there. And you recognize the fact that, yeah, there are some pretty incredible people that are on that stage, but you deserve to be there too. And that can be hard to do once in a while. I think sometimes we have a tendency to brush off our achievements and downplay them. And that's part of the reason why I want to do this podcast and why I'm so motivated and excited to share these stories, is because if we don't share them and we don't talk about them, nobody learns from them and nobody gets inspired by other women. And we just elevate each other when we start to put these stories and these lessons out there. So I love that you totally owned it and that you said, yep, I did the hard work. I deserve to be here. I think that's awesome.
And in the moment, it was really hard, but looking back at it, I'm really thrilled to have been there. And I want to do a little bit more bragging.
Keep it up. I want to keep it coming.
Told me I could.
Totally.
I want to just say that we as women always have to look at what we're doing and how it affects the younger generation. I have 7 nieces and nephews, 13 and younger. And all of them know that this is what I do. All of them talk to their friends about how strong their aunt is. My nephew has bragged to his friends and asked his mom for videos to show his friends of my powerlifting.
That's so cool.
I mean, what this gives me is hope. And hope that this generation that's coming up realizes that women really can do everything. Women are strong. I happen to be very physically strong to be able to show it on the outside, but I'm hoping that they realize that that's on the inside as well.
That's so cool. You're kind of answering my next question, but you've been in the sport for a year and a half now. Mm-hmm. What would you say to other women? I mean, in addition to you're an incredibly strong person, are there other lessons or other things that you would want women who maybe aren't in the sport in the same way that you are to take away and be able to, use in their lives?
Yep. And it's something that I think I've been touching on quite a bit, is that just be better. Just take what you can do and be better. And no matter how long it takes, if you put in the work, you will be better. So just because you're not at the level of an Olympic athlete, that doesn't mean you can't do it. If you want to do powerlifting, I may or may not pressure a lot of the new members of the gym that they have to join my powerlifting team. It's part of my charm. But even if people don't want to or are hesitant, it's really not about how much weight you think you're not lifting because you see how much weight someone else lifts. It's about how much weight you're lifting and what you're doing to make yourself stronger.
That's a phenomenal message.
Thank you.
I have one final question, and it's a question I ask every single person that I interview for this podcast. We are compiling a Spotify Power playlist, which is a set of songs, a playlist of songs that is specifically curated by all the women that I am interviewing on the podcast. So I have to ask you for your contribution and what your favorite motivational song is.
And if you mean motivational in the just get up and move sort of way, I found the song I Love It by Iconopop.
Yes!
It's one of my favorites. I wish that it had 7 more verses because I love the message that it sends, and I love the beat.
Phenomenal song. That's a really great contribution. Actually, that's on my gym playlist. So I totally agree with you. Great song. Awesome. Donna, I can't thank you enough for being willing to, come on the podcast, share your story, share the things you've learned, brag openly, which I love. Oh my gosh. And really let us hear your story and learn from the things that you have learned along the way. So thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome, April, and thank you so much for inviting me on.
I really hope you enjoyed that interview with Donna Adams, otherwise known as Donna the Destroyer. Seriously, Archimedes has nothing on this woman. This week, I'm issuing 2 challenges. Choose one, do both, whatever you feel like doing. Number 1, find your own voice and use it. What are the topics? What are the issues? What are the things you care about? You have a voice and you have the ability to use it to inform other people, to enact change. It's time for all of us to find our own voices and start using them loudly. Number 2, harness your own power. Donna talked about physical power. She talked about mental power. In one way or another, harness your own and find ways that you can use it to make change in your life and in other people's. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. If you have a moment, it would mean so much to me if you could visit the podcast on iTunes and leave me a rating or a review. That's one way that people can find the podcast and another way that I'm able to share these stories with other people. So it would mean so much to me if you would drop me a rating or a review. And until next time, have an inspiring week.